topic because it's one that we see come up so much in the young adult survivor community. Before we jump in, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Samantha Watson, the Executive Director of the SAMFund, and here with me is Michelle Zietler, our Program Director. Hello, everybody. And for those of you who may not know much about the SAMFund or are wondering what we do, we provide support to young adults in their financial recovery from cancer, because we know that cancer-free does not mean that cancer is free. And so we provide direct financial assistance, we provide these free webinars, and we have online support and education through our website, which is thesamfund.org. And we're constantly looking for new ways to support you, our young adult survivor community. So we really love opportunities like this to interact with you, and also hope you'll be in touch with us afterwards if other questions come up, or you want to learn more about what we do, or you have ideas for what we could be doing better or be doing in addition to what we're doing. So we'll have all sorts of information at the end of today's presentation on how to stay in touch with us. So for today, a couple quick notes before we get started. You'll notice that there's a place on your screen where you can type in a question. Michelle will be fielding the questions on this end, and she'll answer them as best she can if it's just a matter of clarifying something that Sherri says in an earlier slide. But if there are questions that need specific answers or things that Sherri doesn't get to, we're going to leave time at the end of Sherri's presentation. So keep the questions coming as they come to you, but just know that we won't be fielding them live in the webinar until the end. Also at the end of the presentation, and you'll see this on the last slide, we have a bit.ly link for a survey, which we ask you please to fill out. It'll take probably a minute or two at most. It's a pretty quick survey, but we really rely on your feedback to help us make this program better and help us make sure that we're concentrating on those topics and challenges that are most common and most helpful to you. So there'll be more information about that at the end. Like I said, this webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/SAMFundTV. So feel free to come back to it afterwards if there's anything you want to follow up on or hear again, or feel free also please to share with anyone you know that might benefit from the information. So now let's jump right in. One of the stories that we hear most often at the SAMFund is about the topic of going back to school. And either we hear from people who either can't pursue a career that they had originally intended on because of their cancer diagnosis and treatment and after effects, or their priorities change, or they're forced to leave school at the time when they're diagnosed, and then when they're done with treatment, decide that they want to go back. And the financial challenge to that sometimes can be overwhelming. And so it's important to us at the SAMFund to make sure that at any juncture when you're making a financial decision that is going to affect you for the rest of your life, or even in the short term, that you're making the best informed decision that you can. And so rather than just drop what you're doing and quitting your job and cashing everything in and just going back to school, we wanted to make sure that you had all the information you need to make as solid a decision as possible. So for that, we went straight to the source, and we are so thrilled to have Sherri Avery here. She's the Director of Financial Aid at Brandeis University. She began her career in financial aid as a work-study student at Brandeis, and then became an Assistant Director of Financial Aid at Brandeis upon graduation. She's been at Brandeis professionally for 19 years, is currently the Director of Financial Aid and Student Employment. Sherri has been very active in the Massachusetts Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators throughout her career in financial aid, and served as president of this organization in addition to many other elected and committee chair roles. She has a master's in higher education administration from Boston College, and is just the best person that we know to be dealing with this exact topic. So with that, we will turn it over to you, Sherri, and the floor is yours. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. All right, so today's agenda, we're going to go over the pros and cons of going back to school, what to consider once you decide to go back to school, how to assess your financial preparation for going back to school, the types of financial aid that are available, the application process for financial aid, how aid is awarded at the different schools that you might be applying to, and then the final piece is how to finance what's left over once you have your financial aid in hand. So let's start with the pros. So what are the pros of going back to school after a cancer diagnosis? It's something that's really new and exciting, and it's something that's just for you. It's a way for you to focus attention back on just yourself again. It's a step towards easing back into a more normal routine. It can help to add a sense of purpose and a moving forward in your life. It's a great way to establish or reestablish social networks that you might have had before your diagnosis. And there are lots of flexible options available to fit what your needs might be right now. The cons are the challenges of going back to school. It may certainly be physically and emotionally challenging. You may not be able to participate in college social life the way that you want to or the way you used to if you attended college before. And you may experience some academic challenges as a result of past or current treatment, difficulty with concentration and memory perhaps. So those are some things to consider, but I definitely think that the pros outweigh the cons. So we're going to assume that you're all deciding to go back to school and go from there. So what should you consider once you make that decision? So there are a lot of things to consider. So first, you'll want to consider whether you want to go back part-time or if you want to go back full-time. So you'll need to consider, can you afford to quit your job? Will you need time for additional treatment, which may mean that maybe part-time is a better option than full-time if you want to keep working, or if you know that you'll have to take time out for additional treatment, or if you'd really just want to ease back into the process rather than going back full-time. And the good news about that is that there are a lot of programs at schools for part-time versus full-time. You don't have to go full-time. There are lots of colleges that will allow you to go back on a part-time or flexible schedule. The other thing to decide is, are you going to be pursuing undergraduate versus graduate? And that's assessing, if you went to school before, do you have enough credits to go on to graduate school? You may need to finish out some undergraduate programs. There are colleges that offer combined degrees between undergraduate and graduate, so maybe you can do a 4-year program and get your bachelor's and your master's at the same time. Or, you're starting from the beginning, maybe you've never been to school before, you're starting at the undergraduate level and working your way up, so you'll need to assess that. And also, are you looking more for a very traditional campus experience where you're taking the classes in person in a classroom, or would you prefer to do online courses? There's so many flexible options available at schools now for every type of student in school that you really can do. You could just stay at home in your pajamas and take your classes from home. The other thing will be, will you want to live on campus or off campus? So what kind of experience do you want? Do you want that traditional campus experience where you're living in a dormitory with other students, or would you prefer to live off campus or live at home and go back to school part-time, or go back to school full-time but just not live on campus? So these are the things that you'll just need to think about and make some decisions about once you make the decision to go back to school. Once you've assessed all of those issues, the next thing will be to determine which schools you want to apply to. Now, if you were in a college before your diagnosis and you want to return there, then you would go through the process of being readmitted through your academic services office there at that school. But if you're not returning to a previously attended college, you'll need to do some research on which schools might offer the majors or the programs that you're interested in. The College Board website at collegeboard.com has a college search feature to help you research institutions by major, by size of institution, by the types of programs offered. So that will help you to narrow down the field of colleges and find something that may work for you. And then once you've selected one or more colleges, you may want to consider contacting them to ask the following, or to look at their websites to consider the following. Do they have a part-time option, if that's something that you're interested in? Do they offer special accommodations and assistance for learning and physical disabilities, if that's something that affects you? Can they accommodate absences for future treatments? Which may weigh into the part-time option maybe being a better thing to do than full-time if you still have treatments to do. And do they offer health insurance and health services on campus, which most colleges are required to, in Massachusetts anywhere, required to offer a health insurance plan. And I can't think of a college that doesn't offer health services on campus, but that might be something to look into if you'll need medical care on campus. The next thing to consider is whether you're financially prepared to return to school, and probably when you're thinking about medical bills that you're paying for, and maybe you may have credit card debt and things like that that have accrued. Probably the most important thing is that any previously borrowed federal loans be in good standing. So if you were in college before and you took out federal loans, you need, if they are currently in default, it means that you won't be able to receive any kind of federal financial aid from any college until that's resolved. So if you are in that situation, you have a loan that's in default or more than one loan that's in default, you need to, there are a number of ways that you can take care of that so that you can go back to school. One option is to consolidate your loans, which basically means that all the loans that you've taken out in the past would be rolled all into one loan, all federal loans. You apply to do this at studentloans.gov, and once the consolidation has been processed, your default is actually wiped out, not from your credit record, but in terms of you being eligible for financial aid in the future. You would be immediately eligible for federal financial aid, and you would just have to prove to any school that you did the consolidation. Another option would be to pay the defaulted loan in full, although that's probably difficult for most people. So the final option is you can rehabilitate your loan with a satisfactory repayment plan. So you would contact the lender. So if it's the federal loans, the Department of Education actually fields their loans out to particular servicers. You'd find out who the servicer is, you'd contact them, and they would set up a plan. Generally, a rehabilitation program takes at least 9 months. So if you're currently sitting on a defaulted federal loan, you should definitely take action right away to do one of these three options to get that loan back into good standing so that you can return to school and receive federal financial aid. Otherwise, you would not have many funding options available to you. So this would be a really important thing. And then beyond that, do you have good credit? And this question is only relevant if you think you might need to borrow a loan beyond your financial aid. So, I mean, hopefully you'll get a financial aid package from your college that will enable you to go back to school without taking any more loans than what they've awarded you, the Stafford loan, Perkins loan, things like that. It's important to know that you do not need a cosigner for any of the guaranteed student loans. So for the Federal Direct Stafford Loan Program, the Perkins Loan Program, which we'll actually talk about a little bit more in the future slides, you do not need a cosigner. So you don't need good credit to get the standard federal loans. You just need to make sure that any past loans are in good standing. And keep in mind that you don't necessarily need to have savings or a job to go back to school, because financial aid is readily available, and we're going to go over all the different types of financial aid that are available to you. So if you do have a lot of credit card debt, maybe you don't have good credit, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't think about going back to school, because the federal student aid programs don't require good credit, don't require cosigners, and you don't necessarily have to be making a steady income or have any money put in the bank to go back to school, because there are so many options available to you. Okay, so for undergraduate student financial aid in the 12-13 year, $185 billion was available to students and families. So if you look at the chart here, one very large source, and almost the largest source of financial aid is institutional grants. So these are grants from the colleges themselves. It's the largest source of scholarship money is from the colleges themselves. After that, the biggest source of any kind of financial aid is the federal loan program. So that would be the Stafford Loan and Perkins Loan programs. And then there are also federal grants. So 17% with federal Pell Grants, which are offered to the lowest income students, and federal grant programs other than the Pell Grant. So between those two things is about 24% came from federal grants, 19% came from the colleges and universities themselves, and a great deal came from the federal loan program, the 37%. So there's a lot of financial aid out there and available in the forms of grants and scholarships, work study, and loans. Now, if you're considering a graduate program, there definitely is less financial aid available on the graduate side of things. So a much bigger piece of this pie is coming from the federal loan programs for graduate students. The scholarships is coming from the colleges and universities themselves. If you're considering a PhD program, a lot of those programs are virtually free to the PhD students. They're basically paying you to go do your PhD. Master's programs, it can be hit or miss with the scholarships. Some colleges offer more scholarships for master's programs than others, so it really is doing some research to see what colleges offer for the graduate programs, but there's definitely a lot more money available on the undergraduate side, although certainly still a significant amount, $53 billion available to graduate students as well. So there's definitely aid available on both sides, depending on which kind of program you want to pursue. So what is financial aid? So financial aid breaks down into three distinct categories. So you have grants and scholarships, which is free money that doesn't have to be repaid. That's certainly the best kind of money that you want to receive. The second type is loans, which is money that has to be repaid and is borrowed by the student, the parent, or could even be by both. And then the last kind is work study. So it's money the student is given the opportunity to earn to help pay for college. So even if you're not working now, you may be able to get a federal work study job at the college that you're attending and earn some money towards your tuition and your fees. So grants and scholarships have three different sources, the federal government, state government, and also the colleges themselves, so the institutions. So the federal Pell Grants and the Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant are two federal grants that at the asterisk means that those are offered to undergraduate students only. So those are awarded to the highest need students. So if you're not currently working, you may qualify for some of these federal funds. Also, the Mass Grant is a state scholarship. So if you live in Massachusetts, where we are, there's a Mass state scholarship that is offered to students going to schools in Massachusetts or even outside Massachusetts. There are also, these are specifically for Massachusetts, tuition waivers and fee grants, but a lot of states also offer these in their public schools. So a lot of states have their own state scholarship programs and also have their own tuition and fee waiver programs for their public school system. So if you are in any state that you're in, do some research about what kinds of tuition and fee waivers might be available in the public system if you're thinking about public schools. And then, of course, there's institutional grants offered by the colleges and universities themselves. And then the last source of grants and scholarships is the private sources. So there's certainly a lot of scholarships out there. One great college scholarship search that we recommend to our students here is fastweb.com. You put in information about yourself, and it brings up all the scholarships that you're eligible for, so you don't have to go rooting through things to see if you're eligible for them. You create a profile, and it matches you up with things. There are also specific scholarships for cancer survivors. FinAid.org has a scholarship listing for cancer survivors, and also, of course, the SAMFund has a resources page for undergraduate tuition scholarships that you can look into. And the SAMFund itself also offers scholarships not for undergraduate programs, but for continuing education, including individual classes and certificate programs and graduate tuition. So if you're looking into either of those options, the SAMFund might be a good source of scholarship money. The average grant size is typically around $2,000, and preferences given to students who've already been accepted to a program and have other means for covering what else would need to be paid. So definitely check out all of your outside scholarship options because that money could help you to borrow less loan and to bring down the bill for you. So private scholarships are very important as well. On the student loan side, there are federal, state, institutional, and private loans. So the biggest federal program, and this is a guaranteed loan, is the Federal Direct Stafford Loan. There's a subsidized and an unsubsidized version for undergrads. And for graduate students, there's only an unsubsidized version. So the difference is that a subsidized means that the government pays the interest on the loan while you're enrolled at least half-time in a degree program. The unsubsidized version means that the interest accrues right away on that loan. And the interest right now on that loan is 4.66%. The federal Perkins loan, not every school has Perkins loan money to lend, but the ones that do, it's a 5% fixed interest rate on that loan, and it is subsidized, so the government does pay the interest on that loan while you're enrolled at least half-time in a degree program. Massachusetts in particular has a no-interest loan program that some schools participate in, available to undergraduates only. Other states may also have loan programs specifically for their residents, so that's something to check into if you live in another state. And some colleges and universities also offer their own institutional loan program. And then there are also private loans, which are offered by lenders such as, Sallie Mae, Discover, Citibank, different banks and lenders like that offer education loans at fairly competitive interest rates, fixed and variable. And we'll get into that into a little more detail later on. So there are two types of aid. You have need-based versus merit-based aid. So need-based financial aid is awarded based on a financial need that's determined by a formula. So you file an application, all of the financial, all of your income and asset data goes through a formula, and we come up with a number of how much we think you can afford, and your need is the difference between the cost of the program and what you can afford. So the need-based aid is based on that number. All federal, state, and most college funds awarded are awarded using this need-based system. And need-based aid can include grants, loans, and or work study. Now, merit-based financial aid is based on something else besides needs, so academic, athletic, or other kinds of talent. Applications are often compared against other students who may apply. They may or may not be renewable, and they may not be available at every school. So that's something to research too, is what kind of merit-based financial aid do they have, what kind of need-based financial aid do they have. And just a note, as we noted earlier, there are less grant funds available at the graduate level than at the undergraduate level. So to apply for need-based and sometimes even merit-based aid, you have to file a financial aid application. So the main application that is required by every college for federal and state aid is the free application for federal student aid. We refer to it as the FAFSA because it's just too long to say. It is required by every college you apply to. So in order to get a federal loan, to be considered for federal grants, and at some schools they use this application to also assess your eligibility for institutional grants, you need to file this application. The earliest you can file this application for next year, so right now the 14-15 application is open. It will be open until June 1st. The 15-16 application for the FAFSA won't be open until January 1st. You file online at fafsa.gov, and be careful not to go to fafsa.com because that is actually a private website that charges you to file your application, and it's actually free to file this application, so they would be charging you to file a free application. So definitely make sure you're on fafsa.gov. You can sign the application with a PIN number. that you apply for at pin.ed.gov. And you can use starting February 1st, you can use the IRS data retrieval tool to move your 2014 tax data onto your application. So if you filed your 2014 tax return before you file the FAFSA, you may be able to transfer your data from the IRS directly to the application. It makes it a lot easier to fill out. It does require data if you would be considered a dependent student, which the federal government defines as being under the age of 24, unmarried, no dependents, so you're not married, you have no children, so basically your parents are supporting you. You would have to provide data from your parents, and data is required from all parents who live together regardless of whether they are married or not. So biological parents who live together, even if they're not married, have to provide information on this form. If your parents are divorced or separated, you would only provide the data for the parent with whom you live. And this application has to be completed every year to reapply for aid. So the information that's required on this application, it'll ask you for which colleges you're applying to so that they can send the data to them electronically. It will ask you for parent and student data unless you qualify as an independent student. If you do have to provide parent information, that means that you provide information for married parents, including same-sex parents, all biological parents who live together, whether they're married or not, and if your parents are divorced or separated, the parent with whom you live, and their current spouse. It will also ask you for income, assets, the number in household, the number of children in college. It will ask you for so for asset data, there are some things that are not considered an asset. Things that aren't assets are your savings account, your checking account, investments like savings and stocks and bonds, things like that, and property other than your primary home. So if you own a second home or your parents own a second home, that would count here. And what you would not include as an asset would be the primary home, any money in a retirement plan, any money in a life insurance plan, and a business that is more than 50% owned by your family. In addition to the FAFSA, you may be required to file some other things. So many private schools require the CSS Financial Aid Profile, which is available on the collegeboard.com site or .org. Many of the private schools, such as Brandeis, require this to determine eligibility for their own scholarship funds. Each application has a cost. It's $25 for the first one, $16 for each additional one. You are required to file it online. If a school requires the profile, they may also require a business farm supplement if you or your parents own a business. And if your parents are divorced or separated, the school may require the non-custodial parent to complete the non-custodial parent profile form. The schools may also require the tax return, yours and or your parents. And then some schools have their own institutional application in addition to the FAFSA and in addition to well, if they don't have the profile, they're more likely to require an institutional application. And remember that you have to file these every year. All right, so what happens after you apply? So once you file the FAFSA and or the profile application, the colleges and the states receive this data electronically. You will receive a student aid report for the FAFSA that confirms all the data that you submitted on the FAFSA. You'll also get an electronic data confirmation from the profile so that you can review all the data. You definitely want to review everything you submitted, make sure you didn't make any mistakes. The FAFSA you can go into and make corrections anytime. Unfortunately, the profile, once you submit it, you can't go back in and correct it. So if you made a mistake, and people do all the time, you can write a letter or an email to the colleges that you've applied to and let them know about the mistake you made, and they will fix it on their end. But you can't go back into the profile once you've submitted it. So it's important to check everything before you hit submit and make sure that everything is correct. Colleges may also request verification documents such as tax returns, either right after you apply for financial aid or maybe after you deposit. And then the colleges use this data to determine the expected family contribution, otherwise known as the EFC. So the cost of attendance so we come up with a cost of attendance for each student that consists of the tuition and fees, room and board, books, supplies, transportation, and other personal expenses. The expected family contribution is determined on the basis that parents and students have the primary responsibility for paying for college. It's a measure of a family's ability to contribute toward a student's education for 1 year. A family's ability to pay is calculated using a standard formula that is applied to all families. And the expected family contribution may not necessarily be what you will pay over the course of the year. And if you want a sense of what your expected family contribution might be, I would recommend going to finaid.org and using their calculator, and we'll give you an estimate based on the data you put in of what your family contribution might be. And this is a measure of a parent or student's capacity over time to absorb educational costs. It's not a dollar amount expected from current income or assets, and it's not an estimate of what extra cash you have available. So your family contribution, let's say it's $10,000. It's not what we necessarily think you can write a check for. It's what we think you can pay out of savings, what you can pay out of current income, and what you can pay over time through borrowing. The formulas for the family contribution are different depending on whether it's for federal aid or for institutional aid. So there's a federal formula for state and federal financial aid, and an institutional formula for aid from some colleges. So any college that requires the profile is definitely using a different formula for their scholarship money than the federal government is. The formulas look at your income and your assets, and they also protect some of those income and assets with allowances. Pardon me. Parent and student information is treated a little differently, and it doesn't include personal debt such as credit cards and consumer debt and things like that. So the federal formula looks at a parent contribution and a student contribution, and if you are an independent student because of your age, if you're over 24, if you're married, if you have children, it will only be looking at a student contribution, not a parent contribution. But on the parent side of things, it looks for roughly 22 to 44% of the parent income is considered in the contribution, and an average of about 5% of the assets on the parent side are expected as a contribution. On the student side, it's 50% of the student income after taxes and an income protection allowance, and 20% of the assets for the student. So the assets are definitely hit harder on the student side of the formula. So if you will be filing as a dependent student, you might want to assess whether those, if the parents have saved those assets in your name for tax purposes, it might be a good time to move them if they really belong to your parents, because we're going to assess it pretty hard in the formula. And just to give a demonstration of how income impacts the formula versus the assets. So in this example, the income stays static at $60,000 per family, but the assets go up. So sometimes people feel like there is a savings disincentive for college, that the more they save, the less financial aid they get. It's actually really more the income influences the family contribution on a much bigger scale than the assets do. So if you see in this example, somebody with $60,000 in income and no assets is going to have a family contribution of $5,000. If you increase those assets to $75,000, the family contribution only goes up by $1,700, yet you have $75,000 in the bank now. And then if you double that to $150,000, your family contribution goes up another $5,500, but yet you have yet another $75,000 in the bank that you didn't have before. So there's definitely a advantage to having savings, but as I mentioned earlier, you don't need to have any savings. So there's definitely if you don't have any assets, we certainly can't ask for a contribution from them. So that's not definitely not necessarily a disadvantage if you don't have any savings. And then on the income side of things, keeping the assets completely the same at $50,000, you see the impact of the income going up is much greater than the assets. So when you go from $60,000 in income to $100,000 in income, you're now paying $10,000 more a year. And when you go up to $150,000, you're now paying $25,000 more a year than when you were earning $60,000. So the income definitely impacts the family contribution greater than the assets do. So each institution who requires the profile has their own formula for determining scholarship. So the profile application asks for information that the FAFSA doesn't ask for, such as home equity on your primary home, information about businesses, some things like that. And the institutions may use a different formula to measure the family contribution. And it is likely going to be higher than what the federal government comes up with. The formula can differ from college to college, but note that federal and state financial aid eligibility will be based exclusively on the FAFSA family contribution, not the profile. So the basic formula for determining eligibility for financial aid is the cost of attendance, which we went over earlier, is the tuition and fees and the room and board and books and all of that, minus the expected family contribution, and that number is the most that you can get in financial aid, so that's your need. And if you look at this graph, so it shows how the need may differ at different schools that cost different amounts. So at a community college that costs only $5,000, when your need, if your cost of attendance is $5,000 and your family contribution is $5,000, well, there's no need because that school costs so little that there's actually no need for financial aid. When you go to a public university that costs $15,000, you then have $10,000 worth of need. And in the private schools, it goes up even more as those schools get more expensive. So a lot of people also think that they can't afford to go to a private school. You know, Brandeis costs over $60,000 a year, and there are a lot of people who feel like they can't afford it here, but your need is going to be enormous at Brandeis because our cost is so high. So people are sometimes surprised to find out that they can go to a private school sometimes for less money than a public institution. So don't rule out a private school due to money. The financial aid reality, of course, is, you know, your family contribution might be $5,000, but it really comes down to what the total cost is and how much aid the school gave you. That's really what your family contribution is going to end up being. So the reality is definitely something you need to look at. So in this example, the cost of attendance is $25,000, the family contribution is $5,000, so the total need is $20,000. However, the financial aid package that the school gave them is only $17,000. So there's unmet need of $3,000, which means that you now have to add that unmet need of $3,000 to their family contribution of $5,000, because your reality is you're going to pay $8,000 at this school, not $5,000. So it's important to compare the financial aid from all of your schools to see what is really going to be the bottom line for you. And financial aid award letters can be a little tricky because you may see something different in every school. So comparing these three colleges, your total need is $20,000 at every college. College A gives you $20,000, so your actual cost is $5,000. College B only gives you $17,000, which means your actual cost is $8,000. And College C is only giving you $12,500 in aid, which means your total cost is actually $12,500. So even though your need is calculated to be the same at every school, that doesn't mean that every school is actually meeting your need. In fact, a lot of schools do not meet need. So that's important to look at. And then you also may get award letters that show the same total amount of aid, but the sources are different. And so it's important to look at that too. So in this example, the total need is $20,000 again, and in every example, they're giving you $17,000 so that you're paying $8,000 at every single one of these schools. However, if you compare here, the grants at College A is only giving you $10,000 in grant, College B is giving you $5,000, and College C is giving you $0. So College C is actually giving you only loan, and they're actually even putting parent loan in there, which is really not financial aid, that's something that a parent loan something that a parent actually has to apply for and get approved for. That could very well even be, private student loan if you are an independent student. That's something that you have to apply for and have good credit for, so it's not necessarily something you'll actually qualify for. And College B has given a mixture of scholarship, student loans, parent loans, work studies, so you definitely have to look at the sources as well. One way to look at, we define net cost now as the total cost of the institution minus the scholarship dollars. So that might be a good way to compare your institutions and figure out which one is really giving you the best deal. So the net price calculator. So all colleges are now required to offer something called a net price calculator to help you estimate your net cost after scholarship, as well as any loan and work eligibility above that. If you go to each college's website and search for net price calculator, you should find their link. You enter your financial data for an estimate of aid, and you can get a sense of what your package might actually look like if you apply to that school. Some colleges use the same calculator product. For instance, Brandeis uses a College Board calculator. So any other school you're looking at that also uses the College Board calculator, they'll let you save all your data and apply it to each school's calculator, so you don't have to keep putting the data in over and over again. And a list of colleges that use the College Board calculator is on their website, so you can see who offers that. Appeals and special circumstances. So you want to be sure, so once you've gotten your financial aid package, you want to be sure to let the financial aid office know about any special circumstances that may affect your ability to pay for college. You can even do that before you get your package, but maybe you forgot and you got your award and it's not enough. Make sure you contact them to let them know if you have any unreimbursed medical expenses, a decrease in your expected income due to your decision to return to school, or maybe even due to your cancer diagnosis. And expenses incurred for learning or physical disabilities that you have, or anything else that's affecting your ability to pay for school. And if you can't afford the college with the package that they've offered you, you want to contact the financial aid office for help. So how to pay the balance due. So you have savings, you've got current income. If you're currently working for an employer, they may offer you tuition reimbursement. So they'll offer to pay for some number of classes that you take if they're related to the work that you do. Sometimes even if it's not related to the work that you do. And then also future incomes with student loans, parent loans, things like that. So there are a number of ways to pay those. You can do lots of different combinations. You can take some from student savings and parent savings. You can take some from you can do a payment plan. You can take an education loan. You could combine multiple options. You can do just a loan or just a payment plan. The schools are willing to work with you to try and work out a plan to make this an affordable option for you. The federal direct student loans that we discussed earlier, so the Stafford loan, the student is the sole borrower. There's no credit check. There are annual limits to what you can borrow each year based on your class year, and it is a fixed interest rate right now of 4.66%. We went over the subsidized versus unsubsidized already. And then repayment, no payments are due while you're enrolled at least half-time in college. And if let's say you took about $27,000 out over your time in school, you're looking at about $300 a month over 10 years in repayment. So it's not really that bad when you break it down into the payments like that. Private student and parent loans. I know we're running out of time, so I would recommend going to BorrowSmart, borrowsmart.afford.com, or there's a number of different private loan calculators that you can use that help you compare the different options. Private loans do require a credit check, a healthy debt-to-income ratio, and may require a U.S. cosigner. There are some factors to consider when choosing a loan. You want to compare interest rates. You want to compare if the interest rates are fixed or variable, who the primary borrower is, how much the monthly payments might be, that kind of thing. So some insider tips as you're applying. You want to make sure that you meet all deadlines. If you need to submit an application before you filed your tax return, you want to do your best guesstimates. You want to keep copies of everything you send. If you have any questions, you should definitely call the financial aid office to ask. Don't rule out a school just because of its cost. As I said earlier, you may find that a private school may end up being cheaper than a public school, depending on the aid that they offer. You want to make sure that you do apply, though, to one or two financially safe schools, and you want to think about how you're going to pay costs over a number of years. And if the financial aid package is not enough to make it affordable, definitely call the financial aid office and explain your situation and discuss your circumstances in detail. So the calendar for undergraduate programs, if you're applying to an undergraduate program for the first time, you may be applying, generally January is when you would file the FAFSA or the profile, sometimes February, depending on what the deadline is. Late February or March, the schools may call you with questions. End of March, early April, you'll find out about your admission decision and your financial aid. In April, you want to compare the award letters. By May 1, you'll need to make a decision as to whether you're going or not and pay a deposit. And then generally the bill for the fall semester is due in August, and then November, December, you should get your bill for the next semester. For graduate programs, it's a little more of a rolling cycle, so they tend to have rolling admissions or cycles that don't coincide with the undergraduate calendar necessarily. Some of them do follow that same schedule of applying in January, February, and finding out in May. So you really have to check with the deadlines for each program and keep a list of all the deadlines and keep track. If you need more help when you're filling out the applications or you just have questions about financial aid in general, you can call the FAFSA Processing Center, the College Scholarship Service, so that's the College Board. MIFA is a wonderful organization we have in Massachusetts, but anyone can call there. It's a nonprofit organization that provides education about financial aid, so you can sign up for their MIFA Council email service that gives you updates every month on things you should be thinking about and tips to remember. And don't forget too about the financial aid offices at the colleges that you're considering, because they're your best resource really. I mean, I've talked to people through filling out their FAFSAs over the phone. I've talked to people through filling out their profiles. We answer questions all the time, and that's definitely what we're here for. If you happen to live in Massachusetts, we do have a wonderful resource called FAFSA Day Massachusetts, and this actually exists in a lot of states. It may also go by the name of College Goal Sunday. It's free assistance in completing the FAFSA. Our date this year will be Sunday, January 25th at 1 p.m. Some sites offer a weeknight where you can come in and they'll walk you through filling out the FAFSA line by line. We have 29 locations across Massachusetts, and as I said, there's many locations across the United States. A lot of states have this program now. Some are calling it FAFSA Day, some are calling it College Goal Sunday, so you can get assistance with that too. And also, you can check into your educational opportunity centers in your states for help. Someone may be able to sit down with you and go line by line through the applications. And these are some more resources that you can find on the web. FinAid.org has a lot of answers to questions you might have. FAFSA.com has a scholarship search. CollegeBoard.com has the financial aid calculators, the estimated family contribution calculators, college search engines, scholarship search engines, and then FAFSAday.org tells you where you can go for those sessions. So that is all I have for my presentation, so I am open for questions.
Wow, Sherri, that was fabulous. Thank you so much. You just covered a lot of information. And for anyone that's listening live, again, it's being recorded, and the slides will be available on our YouTube channel and on our website, so stay tuned. We'll send out information about that. So, Sherri, a couple questions did come in. We have just under 10 minutes now, so if you guys do have more questions, keep them coming. So, Sherri, I'll just go in order of the first few that came in. A couple of them, actually, I think that you may have tackled towards the end. So, for grad students, does parents' information still need to be included in the FAFSA or other financial aid forms?
So that's a very good question. So if you are a graduate student filling out the FAFSA, you are not required to provide parent data because you're considered automatically independent by virtue of the fact that you're a graduate student. Now, if you're thinking of doing a professional program like, for instance, like law school, some of those schools require an institutional application that will include your parents' information. But the federal aid application will not require the parents.
Okay, excellent. Going back to something you talked about earlier on in the presentation about choosing a new school versus returning to the school you'd previously attended.
Yes.
Somebody asked if they have an outstanding balance with the school from when they had left, will they be able to re-enroll?
Yes, so the school will probably require you to pay that balance before you're allowed to return. Depending on how long ago that balance is from, like if that balance is from sometime in like the last 1 to 2 years, you might have some private loan options that will allow you to borrow to cover that prior balance. But you can't take current financial aid to cover that. You can't get federal aid, like let's say you're going to return in the spring, you can't get aid in the spring to cover that balance from another year. So there are some limitations on that, but the school will probably require you to repay that. So you should probably give that school a call and find out how you can do that. So can you get into a payment plan? Do they have any loan options for you? They might be able to find a way to work that out with you.
Okay. And another question that came in that I think you tackled in one of the last slides, but just to reiterate, you mentioned a lot of resources for students within Massachusetts, but what are the best resources online for finding financial aid, do you think, for students outside of Massachusetts?
So for state resources, every state has what's called educational opportunity centers. So you could look that up in your, you could look at your state Department of Education website. If you have, if your state offers state scholarships, generally the organization that offers state scholarship has resources of where you can find help with financial aid. Also, like finaid.org is a great website that has answers to just about every question you could possibly think of. They have a very dense, frequently asked questions section there. The financial aid offices at the schools you're thinking of going to can help too. So there's a lot of resources, even if you're not in Massachusetts. Educational opportunity centers exist just about everywhere. Every state has some kind of system for assisting people with financial aid.
Great. We have just a couple more. They're still coming in, so we'll probably take you right up to 4 o'clock.
That's fine.
There was a question from somebody about whether undocumented students are eligible for any loans or grants from schools.
Okay, yeah. So that depends on the school. So undocumented students are not eligible for federal aid, or they may be eligible for state aid in some states. And then it goes by the college. So particular colleges offer aid, some do and some do not. So it is definitely a question to ask of the schools that you're applying to. And it may or may not be on their website. So you may actually need to call and ask what their policy is on that, and it really does vary by school.
Okay. Switching gears a little bit, somebody asked, do you have any resources for support after graduation and how to pay back loans? School's financial aid office has not been helpful in looking for guidance on the best and most cost-effective way to pay back.
Okay, so the Department of Ed has their website for, so studentloans.gov, actually, which that link was in my slides that you'll be able to download. They have a lot of resources on that website regarding all the different repayment options. I mean, I would say at Brandeis, our best resource is our student loan coordinator. I would tell anybody to call him, and he would walk you through everything step by step. It sounds like your school does not have that resource, and that's definitely disappointing. So I would say then the Department of Ed and the lender that's servicing, well, the lender is the Department of Ed, their servicer also has tools, so you can call anyone at your servicer. So if you know that your direct loans are with Sallie Mae, for instance, you call Sallie Mae, and they can walk you through all the options and tell you what would be the most cost-effective. I'd say that a lot of times the income-based repayment ends up being a really good option for people, especially if you're working part-time or not earning a lot of money right now. And as soon as you go back to school, your loans will go back into deferment so that you won't have to repay while you're attending school.
Great. Okay, we're just fielding a couple questions at the same time now. So somebody, in following up on the earlier question about undocumented students, somebody had a similar question about a student who's here legally but has an H-4 visa. I don't know if that's getting too specific, but if you have any information on whether that person would have access to financial aid.
I would have to research that one. But I could, if you want to take down an email address on that, I'd have to look that up in the regs. They actually list the visas that are eligible. I don't know that one off the, I've heard of that one before, but it doesn't ring a bell quickly as to whether that's eligible, but I could definitely find out.
Excellent, thanks. So to the participant who asked that question, you can feel free to email us at info@thesamfund.org, and we'll pass the question along to Sherri. We'll get back to you with an answer. So excellent, Sherri, that was fabulous. And it's a good thing that we both talk really fast because we just managed to answer all of the questions that came up, so that was great. So what everybody sees on their screen now before we officially close out the webinar, and thank you, Sherri, is again, to find the recording of this webinar, we'll post it within a day or two, both on our website, which is thesamfund.org/webinar, and on youtube.com/samfundtv. And we encourage you to share this far and wide because we provide these presentations. They're available for free download at any time, really in hopes that they will be helpful to anyone in the young adult cancer community and beyond who could benefit from the information. So please share. Also, if you could just take a couple minutes now to visit the bit.ly link on your screen, which is bit.ly/schoolpost1. Pretty easy to remember. It will take you just a couple minutes, but we really do rely on your feedback to continue improving on this program, making sure it's as helpful and relevant to you as possible. And also, we welcome your ideas for future topics. So please feel free to email us anytime at webinars@thesamfund.org. If you have any other feedback to share, please send that along as well. And Sherri, I know on behalf of all of our participants, I just want to thank you for taking the time to provide this information and to do this webinar. It was so very helpful. So you included so much information, and it's one of the issues and challenges that we see probably most frequently within this community. So the fact that you've broken down so much complicated information and really given people the tools to be able to make a strong decision that will help them financially and help them academically, we just appreciate it so, so much. So Sherri, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. And I encourage, if anybody has, more detailed questions, they can feel free to email me too. My email was on the first slide. If I'm happy to answer some questions if people have more detailed things that they want to learn about.
Great. Thank you, Sherri, and thank you so much, everybody. Have a great rest of the day.